I mean, it's one of those things that people don't want to talk about. It's like founders motivated by money. If I wasn't motivated by money, I wouldn't have done it. Like I wouldn't have gone and taken the leap to say, right, this is a real business. I'm going to take this money to grow this business into worth more money. It's not because I was driven so passionately about what we're trying to solve. I am passionate about that. It's enabled this whole thing in my life. But I can't sit here and talk to people and pretend that it's not a financial motivation. That's definitely why lots of people start companies. And I think people should just be more honest about that. I don't think that's an issue. So I always had, I remember years ago, me and my dad, there was a yacht somewhere in Mallorca where we go on holiday, and he had a similar list when he was younger, which was how to get his dream car, go and be a lawyer, do this, do that, do that. So he did that, didn't actually buy the car, but he did the list. So I had a how to buy this super yacht when I was 15 or something. And it was go and be an investment banker, work 7 till 7 for 10 years and do all that stuff. So I always had a drive of one day I want to be wealthy or generate some wealth somewhere.
Welcome to another edition of Built to Sell Radio. My name is John Warlow, and this is the podcast designed to help you punch above your weight when it comes to selling your company. And today's episode is with a guy named Ben Tossell, who sold Makerpad to Zapier. Cool story. Before we get to it though, just a couple of announcements. First of all of the show notes for Ben's episode can be found at builttosell.com. We have really upgraded our show notes in the last few weeks. So you'll find links to all the things we talk about, the different capital raising structures, the different companies. All of that can be found at builttosell.com on Ben's episode page. So check that out. I also want to make a special shout out to Christian Coldea. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name correctly. He gave us a great review recently on iTunes. He says, I have to tip my hat to John. This podcast is just packed with so much value. After stumbling upon the show a year ago, I've actually approached decisions I've made in business in a new way. Highly recommend to an entrepreneur who finds themselves in the trenches of building a business. So Christian, thank you so much for that very generous review. And if you're wondering how you can support the show, the very best thing you can do is give us a review on whatever platform you listen to us on. That goes a long way to helping people find the show. And obviously while you're there, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Okay, let's get into this story of Ben Tossell and his sale of Makerpad to Zapier. A couple things to look out for in this one, and that is the difference between a maker versus a manager. You may have heard of this concept before. It was originally a blog post written by a guy named Paul Graham back in 2009, but he distinguishes between our activities where we are creating something, a product, a piece of content, and managing, where we are making sure that the trains run on time in our companies. And I think in this case, you can clearly tell very early that my guest Ben is very much a maker, and how selling his company enabled him to remain a maker and not become a manager. So an interesting thought experiment for you to have on your own time around whether you're a maker versus a manager and how you structure your day accordingly. Ben will also talk about how to identify a product idea with the potential to become a full-fledged business. He talks about how he leveraged Twitter to build his company, how he raised capital without going down the road of dealing with venture capital. He also chose to offer a lifetime membership instead of a subscription, or at least in next to a subscription. And that's a very controversial idea. Ben has some strong opinions on that. He also talks about how to value your company and how that might be different in the eyes of an investor versus an acquirer. Here to tell you the entire story is Ben Tossell. Ben Tossell, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thank you for having me.
How on earth did you come up with this idea for Makerpad? I mean, tell me the story of this company.
It was by accident. I was working at a company called Product Hunt. And that's basically a website where people in tech launch their new project. So it could be a big company like Google releasing a new app, or it could be a single developer launching a color picker type website. So I worked there for a number of years and sort of a victim of my surroundings. Everyone was building stuff and there's all these new projects that everyone could build. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to build my own thing, but I'm
occupational hazard of sorts.
Exactly. And I'm not technical. I've tried to learn to code numerous times. It just doesn't gel with me. I can't figure it out. I always get to a point where I'm stuck and I just can't push past that. But whilst I was at Product Hunt, I saw companies like Webflow and Zapier and Typeform. And I was like, well, that tool helps me build a website. That tool helps me connect two apps together. And this thing can sort of help me accept payment. So I thought, well, I can string those together to make it look and feel like a sort of quote real product. So that's what I started doing. I started thinking, I think one of the first things I built was a directory for Alexa skills. So anytime you ask Alexa, what's the weather, you could try all these different weird ones. So that was one of the first things I built, and sort of just got the bug from there. And I was like, I want to build more of these. I'm doing lots and lots. I thought, this could be a business. This could be a business. And I must have tried 50 plus things. No one bought anything ever of those things.
So the Alexa directory is
weirdly no one cared about that. But people always felt like they were interested in what I was doing. But when no one was paying, I was like, okay, you all seem interested. What are you actually interested in if you're not buying anything? And it was just interested how you built that if you're not technical. Like, how have you got this website? How does it do that if you don't know how to code? So it's the old, those who can't do, teach. I thought, right, I will create tutorials. I just film my screen. I can come up with these crazy ideas and build them, just record myself and then put that up behind a paywall. So that's what I started doing. And
so to be clear, you were explaining how you can connect a website building product that doesn't require code to an e-commerce, so you can accept payment like a Stripe or something exactly. Like that. So here's how I would connect those two things. And you built a tutorial of that. Yeah. So I mean, the sort of building my own product was, here's a website I've built with Card, which is a very simple one-page builder. If you want to view my tutorials, you click here to pay, and that would link you to a Typeform, like form product that would let you put in your credit card. An automation would send you hey, welcome to Makerpad. The password is banana. Enter that into this password protected page. That's where you can see the videos. And it was basically that, 3 pieces. And that was, those sorts of things could be for any type of content business, right? It could be a blog, news articles and things like that. So that's how I started. And the first piece of feedback I got when I launched it was, I love the idea of this, but the guy doing the videos is so dreadfully dull. So I was like, oh no, this is a really bad start. But yeah, I mean, it was one negative in a sea of positives at that point. And I just thought, well, maybe I'll just try and sound more enthusiastic when I'm doing these videos. But I mean, it's a very difficult thing when you start creating tutorials. But yeah, that's how we all sort of kicked off the Makerpad journey. And this was 2019. So this is relatively recent. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was officially launched in January 2019. I'd had a few blog posts previously when I was working at the Product Hunt that talked about, look, you can build MVPs without code. Sign up here if you want to know more. Just trying to build up some sort of audience. I think I have a few hundred people on that list. So when I said, look, I'm launching this, tutorials to teach you how to do this. If you want lifetime access for, I think it was like $50, just sign up here. And it was a Typeform again, taking those payments. And I think 15 people paid straight away. And I thought, no one's ever paid for anything before. This feels like something. So yeah, January 2019, Makerpad was officially launched and officially a business, I suppose.
Describe for me what it felt like to receive your first order confirmation?
Relief probably was one of the first things. And there was something about Makerpad that was very different to everything else I'd launched before. Like I'd had things that I'd launched that weren't businesses. They were just, here's a directory of marketing resources, so sort of curated things like that. And people really liked it. And it was like, cool, that's something people have used. But having a paying customer say, yes, I want this, even before I had any videos, was like, wait a second. It was sort of a stop and look at it and think, is there something bigger here that I didn't really foresee happening? And I think that's really what happened at that point. I thought, right, actually, this could be the thing. Like, forget all those 50 other things I've tried to do. This actually could be the thing. And I could do this as a one-to-many business. Like, I could be a one-person business with many, many customers, and I could just do the same thing, record stuff, put it out there, and that could be a very lucrative business, I thought. So that's what it was. And yeah, Makerpad generally there was a pull from the market rather than me pushing it. Like, I didn't have to get people to, please sign up for this, please sign up for this. It was much the opposite, actually.
That's really interesting. I want to explore the pull factor in a moment. Before I do that, I've got a question. You're working at Product Hunt. You're on their payroll, so to speak. How did you build up your own personal list of 200 or 300 people around this blog post? Like, did they give you permission to do that, or was that sort of in your own time, or how did you sort of carve out those 200 or 300 email addresses without? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. It's one of those difficult things where you go and work for a tech company and you want to work on side projects. And I think the CEO of that company is probably thinking, okay, well, you can, as long as it doesn't overlap in something we might do, could do, maybe one day do. So I had a few side projects at that time that I had to step away from or I couldn't do because it was like, that's too close, or that's too close, or that we could do that one day. And I was getting frustrated with that. And I couldn't shake the bug of, yeah, but I can build stuff now. I figured out how to build stuff. So I have to do it. I have to and I think when I look back on it, I was waiting for one of these things to have that pull moment and someone pay me for something so I could go, sorry, I've got to go now. I've got a business to attend to that I created. I've got to go over there. But at the time I didn't. I was like, oh, can't you just let me do these things on the side? And really, Ryan, the CEO of Product Hunt at the time, had a very similar story. He was working somewhere else and tried Product Hunt as a side project. That started gaining some traction. He knew that, I think his boss sort of said, you've got to go and explore this. You've got to go and explore your thing. And Ryan did the same with me. He was like, look, I can see you want to launch stuff. You're trying to do these things. You should go and do that. You should go and do that. You have to do that. So I was sort of forced hand a bit and just thought, right, I have to make it work now, because I'm without a job. So I had 6 months or so without a job, consulting and doing things like that I was like, I've got to make something work.
So you've got the first 15 customers who paid for a lifetime membership of $50.
Yeah.
So you've got a bit of a proof that it could work. Where does it go from there?
I just was that annoying person on Twitter saying, hey, I figured this thing out. Hey, I figured this thing out. And basically it was tutorials. I got to sit in my living room thinking, what can I try and figure out how to build without code? And I thought, Airbnb, that's not done. If I could build an Airbnb replica without code, would that turn some heads to, I should go and watch that video. I want to know how to do that too. So things like that started pushing them out on Twitter, and some of them got really a lot of traction.
So you would pick a business model that was working like an Airbnb, where you've got to publish a picture of the house, you've got to accept payment, there's all these elements, and you were doing it without being a coder. You're effectively replicating that.
Yeah, I think you sort of get to a point, I think, when you've built many things where you can recognize, okay, this site is very big, very impressive, millions of users, millions in funding, but really the components are quite simple. I know I'm dumbing down a lot of like, I don't mean to take that out of Airbnb, but it's like they have a landing page, they have like a product listing page, and they have a booking page. You can build those things separately in no-code tools, and you can put them together to have a similar type of experience. Like someone can come in, view a property, and book it, and you don't need any code, like to be able to write code anyway, to do that piece. So that's what I was trying to do. Is everyone looks at the big startup VC like stories as the goal, but really, okay, you can build Airbnb for dog homes like without needing all of that. You just build it like this and then go and get your customers.
So you would use Twitter as the primary sort of publication. Like, how many Twitter followers did you have when you started? You had 15 customers, 200 or 300 emails. Like, how quickly did your Twitter following scale? What was that like?
Yeah, I think I had a few thousand at that point because I worked at Product Hunt. So people had to follow me to like say, hey, can you help me launch this business on the site? So that definitely helped. And then I think it must have gone quite rapidly from there. When I was putting out these videos that would basically be shared by like Mark Andreessen, I retweeted the Airbnb one, for example. I remember that. So that just happened quite rapidly from there, I think. I need to actually go back and check the numbers and see what that growth was like.
Yeah. So give me the numbers, like how many, so in 2019, you had a couple thousand, maybe 2020, 2021, 2022, just to give me the ballpark number of Twitter followers.
Yeah. I mean, it's around 44,000 now. So it's probably, about half that last year and the year before, even further down. So yeah, it would have been tens of thousands a year, I think.
Got it. Okay. So that's the primary way you are driving people to watch these tutorials, but you're putting them behind a paywall.
Yeah, that was it.
That's helpful for sure. When did you make the decision to go from the lifetime payment to a recurring payment?
This is something I always battled with. So at the time of launching Makerpad, I also had a side job helping create the community for what's known as Calm Fund. So they are funding for bootstrappers, essentially, alternative to VC funding. So I was helping them. So I had a sort of day job and I had this side project that was doing well, doing up to 20, 30K a month in revenue. But of course, it was lifetime payments, or we did do some sort of tool partnerships. So companies like Zapier, Airtable would pay us sometimes up to 10K for the year to be listed on Makerpad, for me to make some tutorials about them, things like that. And then it was when I was sort of scarred by all these projects that went nowhere, that I didn't know that I wanted to do a business. I was like, this is great as a little side gig. I'm not sure I want to change that up yet.
And it's pretty lucrative, like $10,000 or $20,000 a month. I mean, when you've got a day job, like that's a pretty lucrative little stream of cash.
Yeah, exactly. And I was very happy with that. And I loved working at Calm Fund. And it was, I think it was about the August of 2019, that Tyler, who runs Calm Fund, was like, look, do you want to go full time on this thing? Because it's making a lot of revenue. A lot of the revenue is more than a lot of our companies that we've invested in, because they invest quite early. If you want to go full time, just know that we'll be one of we're happy to lead the round. We'll give you that first check. And I was like, oh, this is one of those things. I'm like, right, I've got to make a decision here. And I think around the same time, I had two companies who acquire other companies. So one of them is Andrew Wilkinson from Tiny Capital, and one is Kevin from SureSwift Capital. So SureSwift Capital are investors in Calm Fund also. So those two people separately message to say, hey, Makerpad's going great. When can I buy it? And I was like, there's a few signs here that telling me I need to actually go full time. So I said, okay, let's do it. Let's raise it a bit of funding. So I feel like I got something to fall back on, I guess. I can hire a few people and go full time. So yeah, September, October 2019, I raised 350K.
Sorry, 350K?
Yeah, 350K from Ernest, and then a bunch of angels, Andrew Wilkinson being one of those. as well. So yeah.
How much equity did you give up?
It must have been around 15%, something around that number, I think.
Wow, so they're placing a pretty high valuation on this company already. How much of your revenue were you doing at that time in October 2019, roughly?
Well, it was, like I said, it was around 20 to 30K a month.
And not recurring, just one-time payments? Not
recurring, yeah, just one-time payments.
That's a pretty fat multiple for
yeah
for a couple $100,000 in a year in revenue.
I think revenue. It was that. Yeah, I need to check that because Calm Fund basically invest on the basis of it's a shared earnings agreement. So it means you take the money for a year, you have that money, you can deploy it, you sort of hire people and grow. And then after that year, you start paying them back a percentage based on the money they invested in you. And it's sort of a revenue share back to them. And then their percentage of ownership comes down as you're paying back some of that capital. So that's how it started. So I can't remember exactly the equity piece at that time, but I think it was something around that, I think.
Got it. So you've got a war chest now. So where does it go from there?
So I started hiring a couple of people from the community. So it grew quite quickly. And sorry, you were asking me about the lifetime payment. I went off on a tangent, but it was at that point of, right, we got to raising some money. This is going to be a real, quote again, business. Can I survive off lifetime memberships, or should I listen to some people, some customers saying, you should do monthly, you should do yearly subscriptions? And the thing I really didn't want to do is focus on churn or worry about churn or think about, I've got to keep these customers coming back. I'm basically like competing against their Netflix subscription. Like all of that felt counterintuitive to me for the site I was building. I'm building something that is a learning platform. Life gets in the way, work gets in the way, anything just gets in the way of you learning. If you don't then learn within that 4 weeks, chances are you'll churn. And I don't want that to be up to me to then try and compete with all that. So it felt a bit messy. And I thought the lifetime, and even why we started with yearly, was it's cash flow. Like you get that upfront cash straight away. The value is probably already given to the user within the first couple of weeks. Then everything else from then for them would feel like a bonus. So that's how I wanted to be treated as a customer. And I know that lots of these other companies or like SaaS businesses, nothing's like that. So I thought if it's just slightly different and different enough to be like a set it and forget it type payment, then I thought that would be good. And it worked really well for us, actually.
So what triggered you to change or to add the monthly and annual offers?
Well, I think it was, we only tried monthly for a couple of months. So there's very small uptake on that. And then again, it was the churning happened. I think people basically wanted access to one tutorial or one like course. So they pay that, do it, and drop off. But I think around that time, October, September 2019, we did yearly. And then at that point, I raised the prices of lifetime again. So I was always increasing the lifetime. I think from the January, must have been $50, up to the June, July of that 2019, it was around $169. And then I changed it to $217, then $297, just completely making these numbers up and thinking, right, what do I think I can sort of charge? And then brought in the yearly around, can't remember where we started with the yearly, but I just made sure, okay, if I think yearly is going to be at 150, where do I think I need to price lifetime? Because again, thinking about that churn, are people going to stick around for 3 years? That's a long time. Like with a new site, I'd really wonder. So I think we ended up with lifetime being $600 and then yearly being around $250 to $297. And still, most people would go for the lifetime. Most people chose that. So that was a huge credit to everyone who actually believed in us and actually did all that, because yeah, we wouldn't have got to where we are today without those customers.
What proportion of your revenue, you said the majority was lifetime. Can you give me a rough split in terms of?
Yeah, so we did have the semi-recurring piece with these businesses who would pay to be listed and have tutorials. So that was about 40% of our revenue was coming from these businesses. And then 60% of the revenue was between lifetime and yearly. And I think it was about 70% were lifetime subscribers.
Got it. And how was your churn on the annual? Did it come to bear that most people churned out after 1 year? Or were you able to track that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's probably one of the things I didn't track too much because I didn't want to get bogged down in it. There was definitely people who come and like not subscribe, or people coming saying, oh, well, I paid for a year and now I've been auto charged. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it happens. That's how it works, type of thing.
It's the way your subscription works.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I can't really remember the churn, but I feel like the lifetime was definitely the best thing for us to do. And if I had to do it all again, I would definitely stick with lifetime, like early on, especially.
Gosh, that's a controversial statement, certainly in the whole kind of content marketing, SaaS marketing world, that, you know, everybody has moved to these monthly payments or these annual payments, and the lifetime feels like a bit of an albatross or a commitment, a legacy commitment. I'd be curious to know, and we'll get to it in a moment, but when your conversations with Zapier happened, I'd love to know how they thought about the lifetime obligation. So let's put a pin in that and come back to that. Make sure we address that when we get there. So give me a sense of where the revenue is. So at the beginning, you were 20, 30K a month, and you raised 350 grand. Like, take us into the same time in 2020. What's your trajectory looking like?
Yeah, we basically doubled revenue the next year. So it's about 200K, around 200, 300K the first year, and then 400 to 480 or something, I think, was the following year.
And what about the year after that, 2021?
We were acquired. So that's when it all happened. And we sort of changed up what we were doing. And yeah, we don't disclose the revenue for that. But it's been good. We're running courses and things now. So it's a slightly different model.
Got it. But so the year before you acquired, it was you were sort of four and change, 450, something like that. Got it. So still on a revenue basis, a relatively small company. How many employees did you have at that time?
I think we got up to something like 14, 15. And it was a mix of contractors and full-time employees. We only had maybe 5 or so full-time, but we liked working with contractors, and we had very long relationships with contractors who are doing 20 hours a week. So it was, I think that was the bit I found the most difficult, is switching from the maker schedule to the manager schedule. I think that's what the book.
Explain, because people, the maker versus manager, and we'll put that in the show notes, is a great blog post, but explain your interpretation of what you mean by maker versus manager.
Yeah. So the maker is like the person who wants to build stuff, just like the default, you will build stuff. And I've been in that mode since I can remember. I want to build stuff, then I could build stuff, and then I was just building lots of stuff. And then you become this, oh, I've got a team. I've got to like check in with this person. Are they okay with doing their things? I've got to make sure that's delegated. I've got to make sure this is, you're then a sort of a people person managing those people. But really my go-to thing in life is building stuff. Like I would always default, if you put me in a room for a week with a laptop, I would end up building websites or seeing if I could build this thing, could build that thing. So that was that's my biggest struggle, I think, with building a company, was I've got to sort of grow up or switch or think about this thing rather than that thing. And I think that became more apparent as Makerpad was going on, and sort of like, yeah, we were growing, customers were growing, but it was getting to that point in sort of mid 2020 where I was like, what is this business? We were trying lots of different things. We try and do the B2B route and like have these companies listed on our directory, and we do tutorials for them. That sort of feels like an agency business. Do we just go for the customers? That feels like a big Coursera, Udemy type business that requires a lot of venture capital. There's lots of churn. You sort of expect it. And I was in that. Like, I've never run a company before. I've got a bunch of people. We've got to stay alive. What's this business doing? That sort of crisis mode of what lots of people, I imagine, go through also. And that was my like, I don't know what to do because I'm a maker. I'm not like this business operator yet. So that was my biggest struggle, I think.
What did you do to reconcile that struggle?
We tried lots of things. We built different things, and we're waiting for that pull moment again. I wanted to try these different things to see like, okay, that's the obvious path that we need to go. And even I'd have conversations because when VCs know you've raised one thing and it's going well and you're sort of looked at as one of the leaders in the space, there's lots of let's just have a chat type conversations happening. And I sort of used them as, oh, okay, if we were going to raise money, what would you want to see? Like, what is it? And we want those subscriptions. We'd want to see that growing. You want to see the churn at 5% or whatever it was they'd say. And it was very much like, okay, there has to be a decision made here. I can't just go through sort of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's not quite as simple a business as I first intended it to be. Like we need to do something or figure something out. And I don't think I ever did, actually. I think it came around when we started chatting to Zapier. That was like, I feel like this is the best thing that this business, our business, needed.
When you're having those chats with venture capitalists, are you starting to get a sense of what the business could be worth one day?
It's difficult because I think you've almost got to take those conversations with VCs with a pinch of salt because they're not as hung up on valuations as someone who was actually analyzing your business to buy it would be. Like they're more, oh yeah, don't worry about 10 million valuation, 20 million valuation. It doesn't really matter in a venture capital world because it takes one swing for that to almost not matter that yours was valued at 20 million or something. So I was becoming very aware of the conversations I was having, what they were saying, what other companies are raising, like knowing that when we raised, it was a big valuation that really was just sort of was given to us. And it really sort of put a spin on, okay, are these valuations because it's the venture capital game playing, or is it because the business is worth that? And that's how they analyze that. And that's why they are those valuations. And I think it's actually the former is, yeah, we need looking for a certain percentage of your company. If that means it's this much, that's fine. That's what it is. So yeah, that was an interesting process to go through and see.
Interesting. So you're delineating between how someone might value the business for the purposes of investment versus acquisition, and what you're saying, if they're investing, is it only works if it's a massive home run. So what the valuation is somewhat less of a priority at that moment in your mind. What about for the purposes of acquisition? Are you? I mean, you came from a day job at Product Hunt, right? Like you would have had a salary and, like a normal kind of life as 99% of the world has, right? And then all of a sudden, like a year later, are you starting to get the sense that, hold on a second, I might have this like an asset that could be worth like a considerable amount of money?
Yeah, well, I always wanted, I mean, it's one of those things that people don't want to talk about. It's like founders motivated by money. If I wasn't motivated by money, I wouldn't have done it. Like I wouldn't have gone and taken the leap to say, right, this is a real business. I'm going to take this money to grow this business into worth more money. It's not because I was driven so passionately about what we're trying to solve. I am passionate about that. It's enabled this whole thing in my life. But I can't sit here and talk to people and pretend that it's not a financial motivation. That's definitely why lots of people start companies. And I think people should just be more honest about that. I don't think that's an issue. So I always had, I remember years ago, me and my dad, there was a yacht somewhere in Mallorca where we go on holiday, and he had a similar list when he was younger, which was how to get his dream car, go and be a lawyer, do this, do that, do that. So he did that, didn't actually buy the car, but he did the list. So I had a how to buy this super yacht when I was 15 or something. And it was go and be an investment banker, work 7 till 7 for 10 years and do all that stuff. So I always had a drive of one day I want to be wealthy or generate some wealth somewhere. So it was always in me. And I always then went down I want to be in a startup, I want to start my own thing, I want to do this, do that. And as I was going through the process, or you launch something, you see it work, you have team members, lots of it changes again. Like you almost have these mini cycles of, I don't actually want to run a company of 300 people. Like that sounds awful to me. And I don't think I have the skills at this moment in time to do that or want to do that. I'm still a maker. I'm still a builder. I still want to sit here all day making stuff. I'm happy with that. Like that's what I'd like to do. So yeah, that changed over time. You have these conversations with VCs about, okay, if you want to go and do a Series A, these are sort of numbers you need to do. You need to be thinking about the churn. You need to be thinking about subscriptions. And I'm there sat there going, that's not what I'm aiming to do. I'm not aiming to like run and operate a good business that might be nothing in a few years. I want to have it wants to be my business. I want to own most of it, and I want to be in control of this, and I want to have a good outcome that changes mine and my entire family's life. Like I do want.
What was that to you?
It would have been, I don't know, actually, it's difficult to say, but I think it's probably like 7-8 figures would have been in my head, right, I've made it. And that's the freedom. I can do whatever I want in my life. And I think I'd be fine. And I know that number is different for everyone. And mine might be much higher than other people think. But I do think that that's where I was aiming at the time.
Yeah. Because for you, 7-8 figures, I mean, there's a big range there. So I'm assuming it's closer to the 8 than the 7, but I'll interpret that. Would have given you freedom to go back to being a maker, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing is, if I was at that time, before I even started Makerpad, if someone just said, here's $10 million, what are you going to do now? I'd probably say, I'll sit on my computer and just like build websites and figure out how to build stuff without code. Like that's what I'd end up doing. So it was one of those that, yeah, I mean, if you can do both of those things, or you can still be a builder and maker, that's really, I'm still trying to focus on, do I like my day-to-day stuff? I don't want to still have 6 hours of people managing time and I can build for 2 hours.
Yeah.
I want it to be the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, I get that. And I think a lot of people listening will get that as well. So you've got all the VC saying this could be a juggernaut. This could be amazing. You got to switch to a recurring revenue model. We got to be a SaaS company. We got to manage your churn. You got to hire a CFO. You got to hire this team. I'm going to throw a bunch of money at this. Come on, Ben, you can do it. And you're like, that sounds terrible to me. Everything about that sounds like exactly where I don't want to be. So you're a maker, as you're in your own words. And so that's interesting. I'd be curious to know, you mentioned you raised money from Calm Fund. And I mean, they don't invest in companies presumably to not have good outcomes. So what was that sort of narrative from them? Were they saying, come on, grow up, Ben, you gotta put your big boy pants on and here become an entrepreneur, because we want an outcome here. We want to monetize this investment. We don't want you tinkering around making stuff. We want to build a company. Did you get that sort of pressure from them?
Not at all. And it's more of a support network because other entrepreneurs who are often solo founders are also the portfolio. So you end up chatting with them. You realize you all have the same problems. Oh, there's an employee doing this. I want them to do that. There's all of the same things, and you sort of get a feel for it. And really, Calm Fund are trying to invest in like a number of winners rather than we've taken all these swings and one of them will work out, but most of them probably won't. It's the complete like opposite. All of these companies are growing and growing in a calm way, in a sustainable way. That means that the revenue that they're generating goes back into the Calm Fund because that's how the agreement works. And if that's how that works, like their model is successful. If companies have an exit or they go on to follow on VC funding and then go and have a big exit somewhere else, that's the outlier for them. That's not really part of their playbook, but is welcomed, I'm sure.
Got it. That's helpful for sure. So they really are a different kind of investor and with a very different model. Fantastic. So what happens next? I mean, maybe talk a little bit about and I did a little bit of homework before this interview, and there was a tweet you made which caught the attention of some, I guess the CEO of Zapier, Wade, if I've got that right. So maybe talk a little bit about the tweet, and we'll put the tweet in the show notes so folks can get it. But what did you say in the tweet?
Yeah, so Makerpad was a partner of Zapier was a partner of Makerpad's whilst we were doing some stuff.
So a lot of people won't have ever heard of Zapier. So maybe just explain what Zapier does so folks know.
Yeah, so it's essentially an automation tool that connects thousands of apps and tools together to automate your business processes. So
if you want Stripe to talk to HubSpot
if you have a customer come in, you want to mark them as a sales lead, and then you want to send an automated email and put them into Pipedrive, all of that sort of stuff happens automatically. And they're a huge business, and they were a partner because they are sort of the glue that hold all of these other no-code tools together. So I use them extensively in all of my tutorials and running of Makerpad. So we had a relationship there, and I'd spoken to Wade a couple of times through Twitter, and we did a podcast or so together. I met him in San Francisco because Webflow put on this big no-code conference. So we had a group dinner. And I think just the more we spoke, we realized our vision for what the future of no-code looked like. They were just very much aligned. It was just like both of us sort of thinking, how is this not the normal thing? Like, why is everyone told to learn to code? Or like, this is the easiest, most efficient way to do automations and building anything. So that, like, we both want to just get that out to as many people as possible.
The term no code may be new to folks, but essentially it just means making things without necessarily being like a coder effectively.
Yeah. And the name's counterintuitive, and I don't want to have any association with creating that no code term, but that might have been sort of given to me. But it's one of those that code is being generated. It's just you're not having to write it. You don't need to understand it. You can just drag and drop a few elements on a page to create your website, for example. It's very much like my parents could do it, like anyone could do it, children can do it. We've seen that happen often. So it's the least technical version of how you can build a website, how you can build anything.
Great. So you tweeted out, and Wade saw it, this note of the most common tools used.
Yeah, so I did a tweet around the most common tools or the most popular tools on Makerpad, and Zapier was one of them, Airtable was one of them, Webflow, etc. And someone else from the community, so I think, picked up on that and then tweeted and tagged Airtable and Zapier and said, Airtable and Zapier, something no code. One of them should buy Makerpad as soon as possible. And I responded to it saying they'd be like picking between one of my parents. And Wade emailed me to say, hey, did you see this tweet? We should have a chat. And I was like, yeah, I did actually see this tweet. Did you see my response? Yeah, let's have a chat. So we went from there, really. And that's how the process started.
I love that line, pick it between my parents. That's awesome. And so where does it go from there? So how did Wade approach it?
Yes. So Wade was just open and said, look, yeah, this would be a great partnership. We can definitely see why there's a beneficial interest for us to sort of merge forces. And is that something you're interested in? Is it something you've ever thought about? All of that stuff. And if so, like, let's explore it. Let's come out with some numbers and how many customers you have and revenue and things like that. And then we can go from there. So that's exactly what we did. I was sort of like in that moment of, is this a real business? Am I trying to swing for the fences and be $1 billion company? I don't want 300 employees. VCs would push you this way, that way. And then this sort of shining opening came. And I thought, I've never actually thought of the alternative of trying to raise money and trying to do that business. It was, wait, we could be part of this huge no-code company, probably the leader in the space. And what would that look like? What would I want us as Makerpad and me as a maker, not manager type person? How would that whole thing fit together? And what would that look like? And I had to really think about that, because I was like going through this whole moment of figuring out what I don't want. I really wanted to then put down, this is what I do want, and how I do want to do stuff is like, I wanted to still run Makerpad independently. I don't want to just be merged into a company and sort of dissolved, and then you're within this company of 500 employees. That I've never been at a company like that before. So there's a few things like that. I sort of was like, well, we do want to push this message and push out this education to as many people as possible. If that's really our aim, and if we don't have to focus on like staying alive, paying people, like getting that money, swapping time for money type scenarios, which is what we're previously doing to stay alive, then what could we do? What are the options? Like what would we do together? So then Wade and I was having those chats, and then it was just very much like, okay, we wouldn't need to worry about this thing, but more we can look at opening up the no-code courses, and we can have that push out to Zapier's customers. And there's thousands and thousands of new avenues we can explore there and get this to the hands of more people. And really, that was the most attractive thing to me. It was growth without the sort of asterisks of powered by VC, or the growth
but
without.
You strike me as like a very independent soul. Like, you keep saying, I don't want 300 employees. You're a product hunt and you're like launching all this stuff. And they're like, Ben, you can't keep launching these products because you got a day job. So like, how did you get your head around the idea of working or having Zapier own Makerpad? That feels like a real departure for your personality type. Like,
yeah, no, I understand that. Definitely.
Take me inside your head there.
Well, I think probably I was sort of talked off the ledge by all the things I didn't want to do. And I was like, right, that is one path. Another path is trying to bootstrap. And I was very stressed at the time trying to figure out the business, because I was like, this is the bit I don't know what to do. I can start companies or start businesses or ideas. I don't know how to run them yet. So one of the things was, well, I've got Wade, this fantastic CEO who would be my CEO coach, essentially. Once a week, we just have a chat. That's how we talked about what bringing the two brands together would look like. We would stay our own Slack. We would do our own thing. We'd stay all of our own systems. They would essentially leave us alone. And all I would do is chat to Wade once a week. And I've only been onboarded with the Zapier email like 2 weeks ago. So it has, like, we've left them intentionally separate. And that was a big part of it.
You acquired a year ago?
Yeah. So it was just over, about 13 months now. So yeah, we didn't see the need to change from a 10-person company to a 500-person company. And Wade was very, very open with talking that through with me and how that could look. And okay, does that really mean I can just like make decisions myself? Does that really mean we can build anything we want? Does that really mean this, that, and the other? So I made sure that was part of like my diligence, I guess, in this deal. Was you hear about companies getting acquired and saying one thing and then another thing happening, or them sort of being merged and swallowed up. But yeah, I really trusted Wade and his approach and his demeanor about like how he's built Zapier. It's just been really impressive to me. And I thought like Makerpad cannot be in better hands than in Zapier, and likewise myself.
How did Wade, and I wanted to come back to this issue, and I think this is a good time. How did Wade react when he learned such a high proportion of your customers were one-time lifetime memberships? Was that a conversation? Did that trigger a conversation around valuation, or, well, that's an obligation we now need to fulfill?
It wasn't really anything with the valuation. And it wasn't, the thing with Zapier was that they weren't buying us for the revenue stream. Like they do very, very well, and they're quite open with some of their revenue numbers. And yeah, it wasn't like
100 million in ARR now.
Yeah,
is my understanding.
Yeah, it was that when we were acquired. So like they're doing great. They don't need Makerpad's extra 400K to like do any. That's not going to touch the sides with Zapier. So it wasn't that discussion. It was more a case of, okay, what have they paid for, and like how does that change if we wanted to make decisions as a company, like to make stuff free or to open it up a bit more or change what we did as a company.
Did Wade ever raise the specter of just doing it himself? Like, I mean, as you say, big company, we got lots of resources. They could have hired some people to create a bunch of video tutorials, no?
Yeah, they have that themselves. I think we were the independent company. We sat in the middle. We were the Switzerland of no code. We were just, we're happy to use all different tools and we talk about them equally. And that I think really helped us build a reputation in the space of trusted, like a trusted voice. Like,
yeah, because Zapier puts out a video, all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, well, no guff, it's Zapier. Yeah. Like they're trying to sell us their product. But when Makerpad does, there's that semblance of independence. Yeah. And we're kind of agnostic of tool. Interesting. So how did it come up? How did you guys deal with the financial stuff? So like, did he ask you like, what do you want for it? Because clearly no standard valuation technique is probably going to be appropriate here if they're not buying it based on revenue. Like, how did you guys stick handle around the money stuff?
Yeah. So basically I had listened to some of the episodes you did, and I remember, I think someone, I can't remember the name, he was selling a company to GoDaddy, I think. So it was one of the WordPress hosting sites, I think. One of the things on that episode was he wrote down a number and just left it at the front of his desk, and then tried not to look at that number until sort of near the end when different things were happening in the negotiation. So I tried to say, right, okay, let me come up with a few numbers. So in my head, I'm benchmarking myself and thinking, okay, if it's worth this, am I happy with that decision? What would that look like for my life? For the situation, I would go be at Zapier. So considering all of that. So I had a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on them, all just sort of plucked out that I just had different stages of everything really. And then I think I sort of pushed for or asked for like, well, give me an offer then. So we got on a call and Wade said his offer, and it wasn't really something I'd planned for. Like it was one of those that I maybe thought we were going to be sold for less. Like I wasn't sure at what point we were going to get to. So I was like, that to me sounds like a great offer, but that's not what you say or you're supposed to say in those negotiations. But it's one of those that I'm sure lots of people think this in a acquisition process is like, oh, actually my deal is probably different. Like I trust the CEO, so actually I'm just going to talk candidly about it with them, and we're friendly, like we're friends, and we're going to be fine with it. And maybe I sort of didn't have a poker face or didn't have anything like that, because we ended up staying at that number the whole time. Like that number never changed then. So it was a number I was definitely happy with. We tried to sort of come back and say, yeah, but that's the value. That's sort of the value on the business now. Like it's sort of stopping us from doing another year's worth of business, which we could do. And if we did it in 1 year's time, the value of the business could be this number, which is more than what you're offering. So it was one of those of that, like we were trying to push to the future valuation, and Zapier was staying on, yeah, but this is what we are purchasing now, essentially. So we did stay around that number. And like I said, the number always is like a huge factor, but it was also part of that whole package of, can we stay independent? Can I run it? Can we do this? What does the day-to-day look like? And all of those things really, really were a decision to be made.
Got it. And for listeners who are like wondering, okay, Warlow, like, could you please ask him what the number was? We talked before we hit record saying that Ben was unfortunately unable to share what the specific number is, despite my best attempts at getting to share that. But I appreciate that is in a private transaction like this sometimes the case, and totally respect that. So you had this spreadsheet of possible outcomes. These were numbers, like, I'm going to just make up numbers. Okay. So if it was $1 million, would I be happy with that? If it was 2 million, right? Is that the kind of process you were going
exactly
through?
That.
Like,
I was doing,
if it was 3 million, well, that would enable me to do X and Y. Would I be happy with that? And so you had all these different numbers, and you arrived at, I'm assuming, a threshold where you're like, yeah, if I could get that, I would be happy. Like, I would be happy, and that would meet my criteria for a successful exit. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I didn't want to go into the conversation about the number without actually having I do have a cutoff at this end, and this is the reason why. I sort of wanted to have that whole process almost come up with that conversation in my head of, why is it that number, and why would it be a certain split, and why would I do any of that sort of stuff? So I wanted to be as prepared as possible. And like I said, listening to some interviews and reading the book and everything beforehand or during it, I was like, that's what a lot of people have talked about, is saying, like, having that like in their heads of, I'm happy with this, not this. Yeah.
So some people have, and we talk a little bit about this. We have a tool called the Freedom Point, where we actually kind of zero in on this number. Some people think of it as sort of a minimum number, like, this is the minimum. I would never go below this. And then other people have sort of a dream number, be like, that's the minimum, but man, like, if I could get the dream number, it would be this. Did you have that? Did you have the two? And so if I'm trying to understand correctly, so you had your dream number and your minimum number. What was the delta between the two? Like, was the dream number double the?
It was probably 5 times what the minimum. So the dream number was like 5 times what the minimum. And then the offer ended up being somewhere within that.
Got it. So you had the minimum, you had the dream, and the offer sort of somewhere in the middle. So your reaction to that was, okay.
Yeah. And it's one of those that you hear these stories, or you read these blog posts of, like, someone comes in with a really, really like low number, and then you end up with this whole negotiation back and forth. And it's not probably something I'm any good at or have any experience in. So I really appreciated actually the number coming across, and me being like, that is a great offer, and like, I'm ready to accept that. But I know that you don't just do that on that call and everything else. You've got to sort of think about it and consider everything. But it sort of took a big part of that acquisition process out of it, where I imagine a lot of people get hung up and think, oh yeah, but they sort of stiffed me on $1 million here. I really wish I did get that, but I didn't. And like, I think that was a nice thing to avoid in this whole scenario, actually.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you zig when everybody else zags anyways, in every part of business life. So this is perfect that you chose to do it that way, which is great. Did you ever, I mean, as you rightly point out, it would be like picking between my parents, which I love that line, but there was a vested interest for a lot of companies to acquire you. It wasn't just Zapier. There was, I think you mentioned a company called Airtable, which admittedly I don't know anything about. There were a few others that would have had a really good investment thesis to buy you. Did you ever think about shopping the company to multiple potential acquirers?
I didn't. Well, I did actually, and I didn't want to. It was one of those where I thought I'd feel really like, sort of, you run the risk of pissing off your acquirer, for one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I felt that Wade and I had a very good relationship that I wouldn't want to tarnish that even if the sale didn't happen. So I was very much, I don't know, using that. Like if I went to Airtable or someone else and said, oh, like we've got an offer from Zapier, would you want to give us a counter offer? And we start like pegging them against each other. I just wouldn't feel right about it. But another company was chatting to us about like a closer partnership. How do we get closer? And at that time I was like, well, we are in the process of being like having acquisition talks. So they came back with, okay, let's see what we can do. But that was just it wasn't quite the right fit anyway. And I was always in the Zapier deal. It was just I know they were having that conversation. So I thought if they're going to throw a number out, like it has to be now because we are having conversations with Zapier about this. So,
and did they ultimately throw out a number?
Yeah, they did. And I was just like, it's not like, no, we're not going to get to where we need to be for this to change any of my mind.
Okay, great. So it was inferior. How did Zapier like structure the deal? Was it all cash or was it cash plus earnout, or did you get Zapier shares, or like how did you structure some of that stuff?
Yeah, it was a cash and share structure. So yeah, we paid off
cash plus Zapier shares.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know the answer to this. Is Zapier privately held?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have some rights to sell that, or do you only get to sort of liquidate the Zapier shares in the event that they choose to sell at some point?
No, I think there's ways you can do it internally, or the company buys them back and things like that. It's not anything I've looked into. But yeah, that's how I understand it. Is there's events that would allow you to sell shares privately if you wanted to do so. But I mean, I think it's one of those companies that I'd be shocked if there's no public offering at some point in the future. Like disclaimer that I've got no insight into that whatsoever. I'm just completely making that up. But
just as a layperson,
yeah. I mean, Zapier is one of those that also zigs when others zag. They started like completely remote, so they've never had offices. They were a remote company from day one. They only raised, I think, $1.3 million from Y Combinator in their early inception, and then didn't raise for a long time and just focused on profit. And then they raised, I think, just before the acquisition from Sequoia and others in a bigger transaction. So they're sort of not focusing on the building a massive war chest because they've got a very good revenue generating product.
Are you able to share roughly the proportion of cash versus stock, like the majority cash, the majority stock, like anything around that you're able to share?
Yeah, so it's just a slight majority cash to stock.
Got it. That's super helpful. And what about running Makerpad long term? Was there sort of an earnout component as well, or are you now just sort of salaried on that front?
No, yeah, just salaried, and it's basically the share piece is the incentive for sticking around, I suppose, in a cruder way to put it. But yeah, that's we didn't do an earnout or anything like that.
How has it affected your motivation now that you've ticked the box of wealth that you were hoping to tick, and using your dad's sort of same analogy, you're now an employee again, similar to the way you were at Product Hunt. How has it affected your motivation day to day?
Well, I'm lucky in that I don't feel like an employee. So that's been a big part of it. And I think one of the things after the acquisition was I want to hire an assistant personally for myself, just because I don't like dealing with lots of things. And the person I ended up hiring is training to be a therapist for CEOs with stress, which I thought was very helpful. So we're sort of spending our days, we have a daily check-in, and I'm trying to be really conscious of what things am I doing day to day? What do I like doing? What do I not like doing? How is that changing based on like a Zapier putting pressure on me to do this, that, and the other? And the answer is always no with that, because that's not been any part of it. And if I go to Wade and say, I think this is what we want to do, he'll just say, oh, why is it you want to do that? Okay, great. You're figuring that out. You go and test it and you come back with how it goes. That's how our relationship has been whilst being part of Zapier. And I think it's been a massive, massive help to feel like I can build these experiments. I can build this thing. We'll go out and test it. And there's no one in your way. There's no we got to run this through the Zapier team first. There's nothing like that, which has been very, very helpful. And again, my day-to-day is flexible and structured the way that if I want to go and play tennis in the morning, I'll do that. I'll walk the dog and then I'll start work at 11. It's not that structured clock in, clock out stuff, but that all is part of Zapier as a culture. So it's been very easy to go back into an employee, actually, a lot easier than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah. I'd love to get into a due diligence round. Are you up for a very fast round of questions that we refer to as due diligence?
Sure. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, here we go. And I know you've had a lot of conversations with VCs, investors, potential acquirers, as well as Wade. So when I ask this question, I'm not asking you to tell tales out of school about Wade per se, but if you think about the entire community of acquirers that you've spoken with and investors you've spoken with, what's the slimiest trick you've seen them try to pull over on you?
The only thing is when people are trying to get a number out of you or sort of get a sense of what you shouldn't be telling them, even if it's VC saying, okay, well, what about your this competitor? Or they're trying to say, I know a similar competitor to you that basically does this and you should do this, or it's sort of air a bit of dirty laundry about other things they see from conversations they have with other founders. Maybe some stuff like that. But
yeah, biggest mistake you made during the selling process?
Not carrying on running the business as it was before, getting distracted by the process.
What was the lowest point emotionally you reached during this process of selling your company?
Probably within a week before the deal had to close. Just the stress of it, the panic of it, the big change of it, and just pressures of questions and is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? That was a tough time.
What was the highest point you reached in the exit process emotionally?
When the documents came back signed 2 minutes before the deadline.
Nice. What's one thing you wished you had known about the exit process before you'd started?
To get yourself someone who can explain it like you're 5 years old. Just having someone else who's invested in what you're trying to get done, who doesn't have the emotional attachment like you do.
Was there you already mentioned graciously, and I appreciate the acknowledgement that you did listen to the podcast and read the book. So that's fantastic. Were there other resources that you used to really, inform yourself about the exit process? A book, an online course, a speaker that you listened to? Is there anything you can point people to?
Nothing particularly online, I don't think. I did. Yeah, I read the book, and there was another book similar, I think. And really,
do you remember the name of the other books?
It's I cannot. The Messy Marketplace.
The Messy Marketplace. Okay, we can link to that.
I think so. I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah, I was lucky that my best friend actually sort of helps companies sell and get acquired and raise money. So it just so happened that those two things aligned, and we were on the phone every single day, and I said, "What's this mean? What's this mean? What's this mean?" You figure that out.
You tell me. A pint, my friend.
I've paid him already, actually. So.
Got it. So having that resource was helpful.
Oh yeah, that was invaluable. Yeah, definitely.
So he's an M&A professional or investment banker.
Yeah, essentially.
Great. What'd you buy yourself to celebrate the win? I want to hear trophies. Tell me you bought yourself something.
I got an Aston Martin and a new house.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear you actually did something with the money. That's great. Yeah. New house and an Aston Martin. So is that the car your dad dreamt of?
No, that's a car I've always had on my list. Yeah, that whole time.
Nice. Well, I congratulations on both of those purchases, and I'm super happy that you made them. For folks who want to reach out, maybe learn. We got a lot of makers that listen to this show, so they might be interested in Makerpad. You want to point people to some resources or a place to find you online, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Makerpad is makerpad.co. We've got a course that's our free curriculum into no code. So it's all the basics, self-serve, so do at your own pace. And I'm on Twitter mostly at Ben Tossell, BenTossell.
Awesome. So we'll make all of those links up in the show notes at builttosell.com. Ben, thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Ben Tossell. For show notes, including links to everything referenced in today's episode, along with definitions for some of the technical terms I referenced, visit the episode page, which can be found at builttosell.com. Don't forget to nominate a guest for the show. Some of our best guests, including Ben, came from someone who nominated them. You can nominate a guest at builttosell.com/nominate. Thanks again to Christian Caldea, who gave us a review on iTunes recently. Please go ahead and rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on. That's always appreciated. Today's show was produced by Haley Parkhill. Special thanks to Dennis Labataglia for handling the audio and video engineering as always. And thank you to the entire community of certified value builders who help us bring our message to you. I'll see you next week.